The Return, Audiobook Chapter 5. Communication. Saameron came back from the foyer with a truly enormous man, big enough that he had to stoop slightly to get through the door of the apartment. Dark and heavily muscled, with a massive mane of black curly hair, some of it over his face, ornamental tattoos on his forearms. A nadiv. He seemed too thick-set, too strong, handsome enough, but too brutish. Nicky watched with great interest, but for once in his life did as he was instructed and kept his distance, as Saam, barefoot and in borrowed clothes, ushered him into the agreed bedroom and closed the door behind them. At the last moment, Artem turned and made eye contact with Nicky. One of his eyes was badly swollen and bruised. He smirked at Nicky and winked with his good eye. "Hello, little boy." Nicky actually trembled. They watched some of it on the nanny cam, carefully placed earlier in the day when all the adults were busy elsewhere. Knowing that his mother might send him back to live with his father if she found out, Nicky had sworn Lily to secrecy on pain of not being allowed to watch. Truth to tell, it was pretty uneventful. Lily fell asleep after a few minutes, and he didn't last much longer. Tash had been dosed with soothers and was pretty much asleep when they came in. He was on his back on the bed, fully clothed, with a comforter across him. Artem kicked off his boots and stretched out beside him, grinning at Saam. He barely touched Tash except for gently holding one of the Xonak's hands in his own much larger hand. Then he put his face down on the other pillow and seemed to fall deeply asleep, while Saam sat alert in the recliner beside the bed, silently keeping watch. When Nicky woke in the morning, the signal from the nanny cam had been interrupted somehow. He realized later that Saam had spotted it and simply turned it face down on the shelf. When he went in search of breakfast, that bedroom was empty except for Saam, curled up in the chair, deeply asleep. The other two were gone. He walked into the breakfast room in time to see Johnson, newly arrived, face up to the massive Artem. The agent had something on his mind, a bone to pick, but stopped in his tracks when he saw the massively swollen black eye that the half-breed was wearing. He must have commented on it, because Artem leaned into him right down to his shoulder, close enough to breathe on him. He spoke too quietly for Nicky to hear, but whatever it was, Artem was clearly happy with it. He laughed at Johnson's look of outrage, and heartily satisfied with himself, he allowed the staff to show him out. Tash looked a bit groggy, but otherwise fine. "Hey man, you hungry?" said Nicky. Tash looked at him. Nicky had taught him to answer the question with "always." "Starving," he said. Saam slept late, but around 10 o'clock he was woken by an irate call from Detective Vic, more than mildly curious about when she would see their only witness. He agreed to an afternoon appointment, then made a call to have an ET dentist come round and replace the 2 teeth that someone had thoughtfully smashed out of Tash's mouth. He arrived in less than an hour, a Kerep, much older and much smaller than Saam, and carrying considerably more weight, none of it muscle. All of his equipment fitted into one flight case, a wand that served the function of an X-ray machine, fed messages to a 3D printer the size of a bag of sugar. A few minutes more saw the teeth in place, and a slightly groggy Tash encouraged to smile. The dentist gave his own perfect smile in return. All this, and they never invented movies, thought Nicky. Nadia had bought more clothes for the Xonak, and the perfect shaggy haircut, the Oakley sunglasses, the shy but dazzlingly perfect smile, the expensive sandals, the drawstring pants, the white T-shirt and loose white overshirt with designer labels, made him look like a visiting Italian film star. You had to get quite close to see that the film star had been starved, then hit by a bus. Vic, not surprisingly, was prickly, though they arrived punctually. Novak was there in track pants, and Saam nodded at him, noting both the weight loss and the improvement in the man's skin tone. He seemed affable. He was here just for this case, he said, then he was back to his sick leave. And there was Otaku, gazing up at him as if he might ask for an autograph. Or better yet, a selfie. "Hi," said Saam, and nodded again. "Lawyer?" asked Vic, looking at Tash with some puzzlement. "Not today. Do we need a lawyer?" "I don't know, do you?" Saam closed his eyes slowly, took a deep breath. "I can call one if you want. We could have one here in a few minutes." "I don't think you'd like our lawyers." "Oh, really?" "Well, they frighten me." She paused. "Up to you." "Okay, then." He smiled winningly, and she bristled a little more. Tash had been instructed to keep his new understanding of English to himself as far as possible without actual deceit. "Call it a game," Saam said. He gestured towards Otaku. "Is it okay if we use your interpreter? We only did the language transfer last night, and these things can take time to become comfortable. Would that be okay?" Otaku beamed. "First, we have another matter to discuss." She looked again at Tash. "This is?" Tash took off his expensive sunglasses, pushed them into the pocket of his expensive pants. His hands were bruised and swollen, so he was clumsy, and it was slow. When eventually he looked up, made eye contact with the female detective, said, "Hello again, detective." She was genuinely shocked. She stared at those exquisite amethyst eyes. "You clean up nice," she thought. Tash said quietly to Saam in Hanath, "Was that wrong? Did I say the wrong thing?" Saam tried not to smile as Otaku diligently translated the comment. Tash said to Otaku in his beautiful high Hanath, "Please tell her that I apologize for vomiting on her." Delighted, Otaku obliged. Eventually they were seated around a bank of video screens, with the detectives behind them. "Jeez," Novak grumbled, wagging a meaty hand in front of his face. "Which one of you is wearing perfume? Bit heavy on the violets, don't you think?" Both Saam and Tash turned their heads. "You can smell that?" asked Saam, surprised. He and Tash looked at each other. "Good sign," said Saam in Hanath. Then he turned to Otaku. "Tell them what I said." The little man was keen to oblige. Healthy Xanax, he said, have a naturally sweet skin odor that humans sometimes mistake for perfume. If they are hurt or sick, the scent fades and eventually disappears, so its return is a good sign for the health of the Xanax in question. He gave a little bow of the head. "Very good," Saam rewarded him in Hanath. "Now, what do you want us to see?" Vic nodded at the little Japanese, indicating that he should be ready to translate. "This is from the Morrison Hotel foyer CC cameras last night, where an event was reported by a passing beat cop." It showed from several angles, Saam signing the massive Artem into the building. Saam sighed, knowing what was coming up. "Who is this?" "His name is Artem. He's Nadiv. Hoff Nadiv. I use him sometimes when I need to transfer a language quickly." "He's quite a handful. I'm surprised you used him more than once." "Most Nadiv won't do it. It's too intrusive, too intimate, and it costs them too much." "Costs them?" "I'm not a Nadiv, but my guess would be that it's like running a marathon. I know they take days to recover afterwards." The film showed the pair of men turning away towards the lift. As Saam bent slightly to press the call button for the lift, the Nadiv grinned, slid a hand down, and cupped his left buttock. What happened next was so fast that Otaku whooped and said, "Can we see that again?"
Please.
Embarrassed, he said,
So sorry, I didn't quite catch.
Quietly furious, Vic obliged. Somehow, Saam had leaned back into Artem's forward shoulder for support, walked his bare feet up the metal facing of the lift housing, twisted mid-air, and come down with his full body weight, elbow first, on Artem's face. When Artem hit the deck like a sack of potatoes, Saam knelt on his chest, with what looked like a stiletto next to the Nadiv's injured eye. The tape stopped. Otaku looked at Saam, repeated some of the noises that Artem had made. "Ow, fuck," supplied Saam, and Otaku bowed his thanks.
Saameron then says, if you disrespect me like that again, if you disrespect me like that again, it will cost you an eye.
Saam nodded. "Okay," Vic said. "There's our first problem, the knife, a concealed weapon." "Sumimasen, excuse me," said Otaku with great respect.
That is not a knife. It is a pen, I think. A concealed biro.
The death glare that Vic gave him had no effect on his happy smile. The tape ran on for a few seconds. Artem sat up, effortlessly holding Saam in position by his wrists. Then he lurched to his feet, easily carrying the Kerep's full body weight with him, growling and pushing until Saam flew off backwards and landed like a Cirque du Soleil performer. Aggrieved, the Nadiv yelled,
"You didn't mind last week."
Saam answered more quietly, "You're mistaken." Otaku shook his head. Sorry, poor sound. He could make no sense of that. He was looking at the ring of black bruises on Saam's wrists. Vic looked at Saam, who shrugged. Artem carried on protesting.
"Ah,"
said Otaku happily.
"Ow, fuck."
He smiled at Saam.
You fucking hurt me, you fucking...
He dried and looked to Saam for help. "Piece of shit."
"Ah, you fucking piece of shit."
He smiled happily to himself. Vic paused the tape. That's when the cop comes in. Saam was careful not to look at Tash. He was not happy that Tash was seeing any of this. "He is a beat cop who knows the concierge." "His cousin," said Saam. Vic paused. "He comes in for a chat, finds two people causing a disturbance. He draws his service weapon, and then this happens." Artem bellowed at the policeman in Nadiv, "I will shove that fucking thing up your arse. Can you believe this? He's going to fire pebbles at me." Saam suggested, "It hurts if one of those pebbles hits you, believe me. You don't want that." To the cop, "Listen, this isn't going to stop him, you know. Me, perhaps, but it probably won't even slow him down. No, don't point it at him. Point it at me, okay?" He positioned himself between them, raised his palms, smiled, encouraging him to lower the weapon. The cop, an older man, not relishing a fight, touched his taser. "Prokhor, right? You're Stas's cousin." To Otaku's delight, he switched to Russian. "This is not as bad as it seems. You don't want to use that on him. You'll only piss him off. And I've already done that. There was a fight, but it's over. Sorry for the disturbance." Artem was yelling again about ripping pieces off the old cop and repositioning them. Saam ignored him, focusing on reassuring the policeman, until Artem took a step forward. Suddenly Saam was in his face. "You will not lay a hand on him." "Are you serious? I could break you in half." "You could try." "I do what I want. If he points that at me, I will rip his fucking head off." "Not while I'm breathing." Artem towered over him, yelled, "You hurt me, you bastard!" and backed away towards the lift, one hand over his bloodied eye. Prokhor, visibly shaken, finally put the gun away and said, "I'll have to report this, you know." Saam smiled and shrugged. "I don't want to make trouble for you. Saam laughed. I can do that for myself. Sorry for the disturbance. Vic was surprised when Novak waved a hand for the tape to stop. He looked at Vic. So what are you going to charge him with? Defending himself against a sexual assault? Concealed biro? Or stepping in the way of someone threatening a police officer, risking his own safety in the process? I could charge the other guy. Let's see the rest of the tape. She saw Saam squirm a little, just a tiny twitch of discomfort in his face. Yeah, let's do that, she said. Otaku held up a hand. A moment, please. May I ask a question? Saam nodded. This man is naive. Mostly. But he changes to Karagath when he is angry. I am right. He swears in Karagath. Why does he do that? Saam grimaced. He thinks it's scary. Tash, whose face was very white, mumbled in Hanath. It is scary. Otaku nodded, noticing that Tash had had no trouble in following their English conversation. He put out a hand to allow the tape to run. The two men stood close together as they waited for the lift. Quietly, Artem said, He's better, the Xonag. He's stronger, strong enough. He turned to look in Artem's face. If you behave yourself, I'll get you some ice for that eye. Fuck that. Fuck you. Shove your ice. A pause. Tash is still fragile. He's frightened. He was abandoned here, then treated like garbage. He has no reason to trust anyone. Saam turned to look into Artem's face. If you do anything to harm him, frighten him in any way. Artem laughed. What will you do, my little pet? I will kill you, dump the body where you will never be found, and find someone else to do your job. Artem looked at him, shrugged. Fair enough. And then the lift arrived. Tash's interview was quick, translated all the time by Otaku. The Xonak spoke softly, calmly, even when he was describing the horrors of his life with the Russian gang. No, they weren't part of the battle that brought Saam and the other ETs here. His owner, his real owner, he said, was a young nobleman, fabulously wealthy, travelling for amusement. They lived in Russia, he thought, attended a lot of parties. As far as he knew, he said, his owner had surrendered him in payment for a gambling debt. He did not know what became of him after that. He was sure that his real owner would come back for him eventually. He shared what little he knew about his new human owners, the few names he knew, their numbers and movements. He reaffirmed that he knew nothing about the business, nor why they were attacked. He spent a lot of time drugged almost unconscious, often tied, often left hungry. Yes, they had sex with him, usually taking turns as a group, but never required him to cooperate, or gave him a chance to. It was always rape, always brutal. He had no idea why they treated him like that. There was silence in the room. Eventually Novak took a deep breath and said, Well, thanks for coming in. I think that's all we need. Thanks a lot. As they were leaving, as they were escorted into the public foyer, a bear of a man with an enormous beard yelled at them, You piece of filth! In angry Hanath. Saam pushed Tash behind him as he scanned the room. His right hand, as ever, went for his absent light weapon, and his left grasped the pen that Otaku instinctively passed him. The bearded man advanced on him and grabbed him, wrapping his arms around him. Surprisingly, Saam made no attempt to defend himself. Come on! What, you don't like the beard? You love it. You know you love it. He bent the struggling Kerip over as Saam wriggled, trying to avoid a kiss, and said, Come on, let's do it here like dogs. Saam was laughing, really laughing. Get off me, you fucking pervert. He slammed an elbow into the man's chest before yelping in pain. The bearded man was instantly solicitous. You okay? Saam carried on laughing. I heard it on somebody's face. You tiger! He grabbed Saameron around the waist and lifted him off the floor. You know you want me. Get off me before I hurt you. Ah, with what? Harsh words. Foul language. This is a police station. I'm sure somebody will lend me a handgun. They jostled like drunken teenagers, wrestling and panting and laughing and roaring, until the pair of them became slowly aware of the ring of disapproving faces around them. The bearded man grimaced and said, I can't get into the apartment. Nadia is at work and the dogs won't let me in, so I thought we could come here and make a scene. Mission accomplished, I think. His eyes were wet from laughing so much. You know what? Next year it will be 15 years. They are releasing the movie again with all the cut parts included. Director's cut. Finally, I get to be in The Vengeance. Your big break at last. Fuck you! I'm famous now. I'm a big star. Back then people said, who is the ugly man with Saameron? Now they see us together and say, who is the blue boy with Luis? He laughed delightedly at his own joke. Then, they should never have cut that line. Saam nodded. You're right, it still makes me want to shit yourself! Ha ha ha! He hugged Saam happily. It has been too long, my friend. He pushed him away to arm's length and said, You look good. My clothes suit you. Saam made a moue of disagreement. The pants are too big in the ass and too short in the leg, but they're okay. Fuck you! You know my boy. He pulled Nicky forward from behind him by wrapping an arm round his neck. Beautiful, no? Like his mother. Yes, he looks like Anna. There was a quiet moment between them. Nicky, silent, watched and listened. This is your newest friend. Hello, Tash, I'm Louis. Luis. Well, Louis. No, it's the way my grandfather would say it. Luis. I was named for him. You probably don't know, but I'm famous. Tash said hesitantly, I saw you as Camelar. Ha! Luis was absolutely delighted. He looked across at Saam. You see! Perhaps we should all go for something to eat. Saam looked at him. Louis would enjoy the attention. He would not. Let's go back to the apartment. Tash will need some rest. We can order pizza. He looked at Louis's new paunch and some salad for you. Of course. Turning, he said, Whose face did you break? Artem's. You're still using that psychopath. I wouldn't take him on without a machete and a machine gun. Yeah. What, you really hit him? It was necessary. Big balls, my friend, big cojones. The group started to leave, and Saam paused, turned to hand back Otaku's pen and smile his thanks. I have your number, he said, preempting Otaku's next question. Otaku thought back to the careful way Saam had placed his own phone beside Otaku's, so that they were just touching. It had looked a little calculated at the time. Tash speaks English well. Saam nodded. You didn't really need me. You wanted to hear me translate. Another nod. Shyly, Otaku said, It was a pleasure to meet you again. I am glad your friend is so much better. If I can ever be of use. His heart swelled when Saam took his hand. I'll call you. Tash did indeed excuse himself in sleep. Saam was beginning to realize that the Xonak was younger than he had thought. The suffering of the past year had aged him. He was closer to Nicky's age than to his own. He missed Lily. Tinkerbell is with Mom, Nicky informed them. Louis gave him a slap on the shoulder. To Saam, he said, She's beautiful, no? Saam nodded. You sure she's yours? Fuck you! You know, when she was born, I was there for the birth. I was so proud. The golden hair surprised me, but okay, she's like her mother. But she was oxygen deprived during the birth, and her skin was a little blue. I tried not to think. My heart was hurting. Then they slapped her, and she screamed, and she turned bright pink. I don't think I have ever been so happy. And she hasn't stopped yelling since, offered Nicky. Louis slumped into his seat, stroking his beard. You hate it. I hate it. Why? I think it makes me... You look like a Karagath peasant. But a handsome one! No, I can shave it in a week or so. The wait will take longer, but more effort. He slapped his belly, enjoying the noise it made, looked thoughtfully at his friend, who pulled on his beer. You know, I often wondered why you wouldn't have children with her. That's why she threw you out, right? Saam's eyes flickered at the phrase, threw you out. That's why she asked me to leave, yes. But why? You would have had such beautiful babies. You shouldn't ask such personal questions. You're as bad as Johnson. Nicky's head came up. Artem said something to Johnson. He was really pleased with himself. I'd love to know what he said. Johnson looked appalled. Saam shrugged. You owe me a personal question, remember? Johnson shook his head. Then he hesitated and said, Why would he call me Neil? He seems to think my name is Neil. Or Niels? Could that be? Saam was laughing. The beers had relaxed him. Niels? Well, it's a compliment. Niels was handsome. Yellow-haired like you. Older than you, not as tall. Nice manners. A powerful man. He was the Emperor of Karagath. You met the Emperor of Karagath? Nicky was impressed. Well, I stood next to him and poured his wine for an evening, when he was visiting my owner's estates. It's not like we braided each other's hair and swapped secrets. He didn't add that the Emperor had refused his services for the night, leaving him to a couple of guests whose manners weren't as gentle. So what did he say to you, Niels? Johnson looked sideways at Nicky and shook his head. I still want to know why you didn't want babies. I see the way you look at Lily. Saam sighed. Both my parents were crossbreeds. Neither was fully Carib. The breeding farm told my owner I was a non-breeder, no use to them. Once he was done with me, they would not buy me back, because there was no way to know what the issue would look like. Issue, a word routinely used on breeding farms. Saam looked very serious, his happy mood threatening to evaporate. Issue? Oh, my friend. Fuck them! What does it matter? You would love them anyway. What would they have to look like before you would not be able to love them? Saam looked at his friend. Well, maybe if they had a beard like that. Saam cornered Johnson alone a little later. He was pretty drunk by now and incautious. This is the personal question you owe me. What did Artem say that offended you so much? Johnson frowned. Saam pushed him. We agreed years ago that we would tell each other the truth. Johnson said nothing. Oh, for fuck's sake, how bad can it be? Just tell me. Johnson sighed. I was in his face. He could see I was angry with him. You know why? I didn't say anything because I could see from his black eye that you dealt with it. As near as I can recall, he said I was jealous because I've never had those clever hands on me, or that sweet mouth. Saam stopped, swayed a little. His face was pale. It wasn't hard to imagine the exact words the Nadiv had used. I wish you hadn't told me that. Perhaps it's time you went to bed. I think you're right. He made his way to his room and fell face first onto the bed. Johnson was glad he'd stopped where he had. He'd spared Saam the last sentence about the joy of sinking your manhood into a body that beautiful, that tight. Honesty between friends was a good thing. Discretion had its points, too.